I became interested in the 1940s because I'm a member of the post-war baby boom, and all my relatives, whenever they got together, my older relatives would immediately be talking about the Blitz and their wartime experience and rationing and so on. And so you become fascinated by that. When as a teacher we had to do the Second World War, to make things interesting for the children, I began to pick up things like gas masks and ration books from junk shops. And after a while it became a massive collection, which I still continue today. The most fascinating part of writing for me is the actual research. It enables you to look in all these wonderful old magazines and archives, and you can immerse yourself in that for days on end, and I find that a real fascinating thing. The most significant influence on fashion in the 1940s really was rationing, shortages. And so you would be making clothes and mending clothes and trying to recycle things as much as possible. Farrar was a pattern popular in the 1920s, 1930s, and it had lots and lots of different colours. And that came back in with a bang in the 1940s because make, do and mend required that you took down old bits of knitting and re-knitted it, and you never quite had enough wool to do a whole jumper. And so Farrar was great because you were able to use odds and ends of different pieces of wool that you'd got left over. Makeup became really scarce. It wasn't that it was rationed, it was just a real shortage, and women used their imagination and their ingenuity to come out with alternatives. Beetroot juice was very useful, either as lipstick or as blusher. The eyebrows, people used a thick soft lead pencil rather than an eyebrow pencil, or they would just use dust from picture rails and so on, wipe their fingers along that and then wipe that into their eyebrows. In the book, I've tried to blend the facts with anecdotes, stories from the period, humorous examples of what went on, to make it a very readable book, to make it a very accessible book. Utility wasn't entirely war years. It didn't actually start till 1941, but it went on until 1952. It was a decade and a little bit it went for. Although actually it started in 41, it didn't actually begin to appear until very late 41. The very first bits were in December 41. The first element of the utility scheme was actually furniture. That started, standard furniture as they called it, started to be produced before the clothing. But then the clothing came along, and the clothing was such a hit that they began to add things like blankets, bed linen, furniture, fabric, pencils, lighters. The list goes on and on. So it was basically utility was about well-made things at a reasonable price, as they said at the time, for working people. It's very rare to come across a book where they've got it all right. It was such an arcane system, it was an incredibly bureaucratic system with thousands of different specifications, hundreds of different items that were produced, that it is very difficult for anybody to know the answers to this. But so many of these answers have disappeared in the mists of time, and you're absolutely right, that awful lot of myths have taken over. The 11011, for instance, is not utility at all, but I won't go too deeply into that. I want people to buy the book. All the major items of clothes, utility clothes, would be produced in 3 different qualities, from the cheapest, the foundation level, the general level, and the higher level, as they were called. And each one had a higher ceiling on its controlled price, so that you could dress yourself according to some extent to your purse. The problem that they found was that with rationing, of course, a lot of people realised that if I can only buy one suit, I will buy the most expensive one I can to make it last. And so in 1944-45, the government found itself with an awful lot of this early utility of its hand, this foundation utility, which they bought up in order to clothe Europe, as it were, after the liberation. And they introduced a new super utility, and that's where the super utility comes in. But yes, 3 levels for the shoes, for most of the major items of the clothes. But they were different price ranges and different quality for that reason.